Got it.
Okay, here we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. On this video, I have a very special guest, my friend Jamie. How you doing, Jamie?
Hi, Dee.
So nice to have you with me today. I told Jamie about this project I was working on, wanting to help new teachers that are getting ready for the school year or who have already started the school year. And she agreed to be the guinea pig, to be the first on my channel. And so we're going to talk about first year of teaching, or the first couple of years of teaching. So Jamie, share with us the lessons, some of the things that stood out to you that you learned your first year in teaching.
Dee, thank you so much for having me on. And hi, new teachers. Hi. My first years of teaching, wow, you feel all the feels. And for those of you who are new and you've already started the school year, you may have gone through moments of just joy and tears and confusion. And then you may have felt all of them at the same time, like instantaneously and simultaneously. And that's okay. It's okay. The first years of teaching for me they had moments of joy. They had pivotal moments where I felt like the success was there. And then the next day, I got into that same classroom and it felt like I was failing, like I'd never taught these students before, like they weren't getting it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It feels like a roller coaster of emotion, right?
Absolutely.
You have those successes and then you feel joy, and then your lesson tanks and you're just like, oh, what happened?
You're absolutely right. And it can flip on a dime. It can flip on a dime. Your period one may be amazing. By the time you get to period 4, you're like, I don't even think I should be teaching anymore because clearly today has proven it.
Well, I know. I totally agree with that, because sometimes you feel like, what was I thinking? I think I could do this. Nobody told me that this was going to be this hard.
Nobody told me. So as a new teacher, I didn't have a linear path where I was an education major and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was fortunate to come out of undergrad and be offered the opportunity to teach at my old high school.
Nice.
Small boarding school. So I was able to work with teachers who I had previously and students who weren't there when I was in high school, but had just started once I graduated from high school.
So you probably went into it feeling kind of confident, like you knew the lay of the land, you knew some of the faculty.
And I thought that was going to just, make it smooth sailing, because in my mind, leaving undergrad, I could conquer the world. And how hard was it going to be to teach English?
Mm-hmm.
Man, oh man. So in my first years of teaching, and this is particularly poignant for those who are going back to their alma mater, I needed to navigate people who had been my teacher before. They were now my peers. Mm-hmm. And I needed to navigate students who were only 4 years removed from me in age.
Right. So was any of them trying to date you?
No, luckily it was an all-girls school, and at that time, nobody was trying to date me, but it was still very much, you're not much older than me. You're not much older than me.
Mm-hmm.
So
were there kids who looked at you more of a peer than actually an adult that was their teacher?
I think at first, because even my former teachers were still trying to navigate me being a peer. So they would treat me at times, not intentionally, I don't think, but at times they would treat me like a student. And so the students observed that, and therefore they tried to get a little bit chummy. Now, fortunately, I didn't have any problems with setting that boundary for the student.
That's important.
It is. And part of me setting that boundary was establishing my voice as I'm no longer your student, former teachers, I'm your peer, and establishing my voice within the institution as a professional, starting off my career there. Mm-hmm. So it took a couple of weeks, but I finally found my footing in terms of, yes, I'm sitting in faculty meeting now, just like you are. So I need everybody to address me by my title and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. And for me, what made successes in my first year were finding and establishing relationships, finding and navigating those relationships with my former teachers as a peer, and finding and establishing relationships with new teachers who come on board. That ability to connect with people, to connect with other adults, to connect with those who were going to advocate for me and to help me in genuine ways was really crucial. One thing that stood out in my first year, my former AP English teacher came and she visited my classroom in advance of my formal preliminary review. And I'm so thankful that she did that because I'd walked into teaching as a new teacher, going back to my old high school with the mindset of I need to duplicate how I was taught and what I was taught.
Right.
So my first couple of weeks, in addition to trying to navigate the relationships and, establish myself as a new teacher and a professional, I'm also trying to emulate what my AP English teacher did and what my history teacher did.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was failing miserably because it didn't feel like I was doing what they did. But in me trying to mimic exactly what they did, I wasn't being authentic. And I'm so thankful to that teacher who came in and did the mock review for me because her words were simply this. Jamie, when you start letting Jamie speak and when Jamie starts teaching, this is going to be a phenomenal year. And so at first, as a new teacher, I was so struck by that and it hurt because I already thought I was failing. As a teacher, we're perfectionists. We want to get it right. We want to learn and we want to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do it well now.
Yeah.
But that teacher coming in and telling me that made me stop and say, be Jamie. You are not teacher X. You are not teacher Y. You are Jamie.
See, and I love that because she knew you, right? So she's not just observing a colleague, she's observing someone that she knows really well. And I love that you said that and that you shared that because it's true. Like you go into the classroom as a new teacher, with things that you've learned, examples that you've had, just like you said, with that example of your AP English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think about all of my favorite teachers and how I learned and how they taught, and you think, okay, I'm going to try this.
Yep.
And it's true. It does take time to really navigate the classroom and pedagogy and curriculum to deliver it in a way that is authentically you and in a way that feels comfortable, and you can tell that it starts to translate over to the kids, because I think that they can tell that there's something off. I'm not really sure what it is.
Yeah.
And you feel comfortable and you're excited, then the kids really tap into that excitement as well.
And that what you said is the true moment that I had, that breakthrough moment. So that night after she told me, once Jamie starts talking, once Jamie starts presenting, this is going to be amazing. After I got my little cry out, I went in the next day and I scrapped the lesson that I had made in their model, in the model that I thought that they were teaching me in.
Yes.
And it was that first moment where the students were laughing, we were having a great time, the bell rang and they were like, oh man, it's like, no, wait, don't lose this energy. Take it to your next classes. We're coming back here. That is when I felt the light turn on for me. That's when my classroom lit up. And, there were moments thereafter where it just plummeted, but it was those successes, those little moments where they recharged me and they refreshed me and they kept me going. They kept me going, even when I had peer relation issues, even when I had other moments that were very frustrating as a new teacher. It was those moments along with the relationships that I established, because establishing those relationships, I realized people had my back. And That was so important. So important. Finding my people in that space to know, because like you said, Dee, it's hard out here for a new teacher. It's hard.
It's hard. And the thing is that when you're new, you don't realize that there's other people struggling, right? Because if the
Exactly.
teacher's returning, maybe they're teaching a new subject. And so it's so important that when you go to faculty meetings or your department meetings, or when you meet other new teachers for the first time, it's good to know who else is in the same boat and really establish that network of support.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that what you shared about, I loved how you said that she came in to observe you. That is such helpful information, having someone come in before your official observation, because that can be nerve-wracking.
It really can. It really can. And on
Like,
the flip side, I went to her classroom and
oh
saw what
yes.
a seasoned teacher of 25, 30 years who'd already taught me before, but I'm looking at it through a different lens now. I'm
Mhm.
looking at it from the, okay, so this is how she's delivering this content. I'm not being the absorber to
Mm,
try to learn it and
yes.
spit it back out. I'm now, that was interesting how she posited that question. That was interesting how her seminar classes are just about her asking questions. She's not answering anything.
Mhm.
And I did that for a few other teachers who were willing to allow me to come in to see. And I didn't just stick with my subject. I went to a math class, I went to history class just to see how they were delivering, because seeing it from that different vantage point, just like being in a department meeting from a different vantage point. As a student, I thought faculty meetings were like this, fire and brimstone, like special stuff going on. No, it's just a bunch of sleepy people at 7:30 in the morning trying to figure out
Right.
what's going
Everybody with
on.
their coffee.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, I think about the schools that I've been at, because not
Mhm.
every school has an actual mentor program with a mentor teacher, like that's their job. So the two schools that did have that, um, the mentors were really great. However, the one of the two mentors, she asked me, what can I do to help you? And I told her, well, honestly, it would really help me, because as we're sitting down, she's giving me strategies and she's telling me all of these wonderful things that I can do in my classroom. Um, and I just told her straight up, I said, what would really be helpful is to see you do these strategies in my classroom with my students. I'm just being real. Like, that is the most helpful thing that you can do for me. And she did. So I gave her a lesson plan because she said, give me a lesson plan and I will come into your classroom on this day. So we planned ahead of the time. It was a lesson like next week, but she was going to come in and deliver that lesson to one of my classes and show me some of the strategies that we had talked about. Wow, that was incredibly helpful for me to see her do that with my students, because there were certain students that were a little more difficult than others. And I needed to see how she did those strategies with that student, because I mean, otherwise it's just theoretical. When you talk about things, you
Yes.
read about things, and
Yes.
no, I need to observe it. So I'm glad you got to go observe other teachers. That is also really helpful. And it's awesome when you have a principal who gives you that, freedom to be able to go and observe others. I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely. Now, it did mean I had to give up a couple of planning periods, but I
Right.
think more it was of greater help at that point because I could see things in a different perspective. Um, and that was key for me as a new teacher because, again, I walked in with this, okay, I'm going to do it this way. This is how it worked for me. And so, and the execution just, I couldn't deliver. I couldn't deliver what they had done because I'm not them. So
Right.
I'm
And so
very,
you just have to take what you've learned in your teacher program, and sometimes you have to throw it out or sometimes you have to tweak it to fit
that's
you.
very true. To fit you, because it ultimately comes down to the students have that sixth sense where they're like, she doesn't know what she's doing, or she's not feeling confident about this. So we can kind of poke holes in this potentially.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is that I feel like as a new teacher, well, even just teachers in general, we're just so hard on ourselves. We are so hard on ourselves.
yeah,
We
yeah.
take it home, you take that work home, whether it's physical or mental and emotional. And we just have to be kind to ourselves and realize it's okay. It's okay that things didn't go the way you had planned. Tomorrow is a new day, and you just keep trying again, because it's definitely trial and error, just constant trial and error.
And D, that's where that network of people really helps. It's where that network just reminds you, get up, we're going to do it again. It's a brand new day. You're still making a difference, even though you feel like you're not.
Mhm.
The students are still learning and observing and retaining something, even though it looks like they're not.
And the thing is that students will tell you that they don't like the lesson. They don't want, because they'll say, why do I have to learn this? What does this have to do with my life? And so when students would ask me that, I would say, um, well, the state says you need to learn this subject. How do you think that you would best learn this subject, whatever it is? And so a lot of times, even just collaborating with the students, because sometimes the students have some good ideas.
They do. They
And so
do.
I would just say, well, let me look into that. and
Some of them were trash. Some of the ideas were like, yeah.
questionable. But when they would talk about going on field trips, I mean, I wish that it was that easy to just say, hey, let me just call up the bus company and we'll roll on out to that museum or whatnot. But it doesn't. So um,
Mhm.
it makes me
I,
wonder.
one other thing I will say to new teachers, in COVID, as hard as it's been, it has mechanized and digitized many things.
True.
So leverage that. These students they're not necessarily tech savvy and the computer all the way, but they know enough on their phone that they can get around.
Yes.
So have them immersed in as much as you can in visual elements that we were hindered from doing pre-COVID. Now you can do a full museum tour for
Right.
free.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas before it was like, oh, you could get bits and pieces of the museum, but not the full thing.
Hmm. Yeah. I love it. That's so true. I mean, there's some struggles with different things with COVID, but at the same time, there's definitely a lot more access to resources than there was before. And
Absolutely.
even being able to collaborate um, with other teachers, so you don't really feel like you're alone. But
Yeah, not that you're alone, because you're not. Because you're
yeah,
not, especially with the teacher needs, the need for the number of teachers that we have right now in this school year, you are definitely not alone. So
mm,
many of your people in your building may be only in their second year of teaching, or they may be brand new to that building, and
yeah,
therefore they feel like a brand new teacher.
yeah, exactly.
Definitely. So I would love to share the next part of my journey when I moved from teaching high school to middle school. Can I share that?
Go ahead, Jamie. Share that with us.
So I taught at my high school for 2 years, and then I changed schools. I went to teach elementary middle. I can tell you, I work better with older children than adults.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that younger populations required so much.
Wait, so
But
how did you make that decision? I'm just curious now that you say that, because I feel like you're brave. Like I started with secondary and then it didn't even dawn on me to try, younger grades.
Well,
Good
it
for you.
was, I had my daughter at the end of my second
Mm,
year. And
okay.
so I took a little bit of time off, but not much time. I realized that we needed the second income in the household. And so
Okay.
I wasn't at a point where I could, with a young baby, travel so far to go to work at my high school for
Okay.
the hours that I did.
That
And so
makes
I
sense.
switched. Yeah. And so I switched. And I found a small private school in Baltimore City, and I began teaching English there. Um, so 2 years in, I had some techniques. I had some things that were really working, but it was like being a brand new teacher all over again
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I'm in a totally different population.
absolutely.
Again, I knew establish my relationships because I needed to quickly learn the culture of the school while still learning how to work with middle schoolers because that was the
Mm-hmm.
primary population with which I worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for me, Dee, the bravery that came in was when I acknowledged this is not my fit. This
Mm-hmm.
is not my fit. Um,
Yeah.
because you can feel as the new teacher like I'm doing something wrong. It's just not working. I'm going against stream all the time. And I did feel like that as a middle school teacher. But I had to stop and say, it's not the students, it's not me. It's just that this is not my fit.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to recognize, okay, I work better with older populations.
Mm-hmm.
So I then transitioned to working in higher ed. And once I got to higher ed, I was working as an academic advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Love it, still do,
Mm-hmm.
but I miss the classroom.
Yeah.
So I made my path back into the classroom teaching the freshman orientation classes.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that just makes my whole day. Makes my
Yeah.
whole day.
Well, it's really different too because in higher ed, for the most part, they want to be there, they're paying to be there, or they have a scholarship to be there. So it's definitely different. But I wanted to circle back because when you said that you realized that it wasn't a fit, like what was it exactly that
Mm,
triggered that thought process? Because I was thinking about what you said earlier about how you feel like you're failing and things aren't working, and I think that that's normal for new teachers to feel
absolutely.
that way, and it's hard to feel like you're being successful at anything. So
Yeah.
I was just curious, what was it that made you feel like, this is not a good fit?
You know, I'm glad you asked that because during that process of me really reflecting, um, I I had to go through that mourning period of I did fail, I'm failing the students, or why aren't the students getting it?
Mm-hmm.
But I remembered back to the successes I had.
Mm-hmm.
I I
Yeah, that's
remember
good.
I remember back to that because I was like, if I was that bad, A, they wouldn't have hired me, I would hope.
Right.
B, if I was really not an educator at heart, um, then I
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't have worked out. I made the change not because I didn't like my former institution. I made the change just because life circumstances moved me in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I needed,
that makes sense.
yeah. And so I needed to acknowledge that as well. You didn't leave because something was wrong. You left because your life changed.
Right.
Because your life changed doesn't mean that you are necessarily built for this population.
Mm-hmm.
I instinctively knew I wasn't going to go
Mm,
pre-K, kindergarten. I wasn't going to
right.
do the elementary. But
Yeah.
middle school, again, just like previously, how bad could it be?
Mm-hmm.
How bad
Right.
could it be? I wasn't prepared and didn't have enough training. That is a population I would need specific training to work with
Mm-hmm.
because when I am seeing a fifth or sixth grader oscillate between the behavior of a second grader and wanting to be a semi-adult in 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, JB, they didn't call me JB, but they're touching me, they're breathing near me.
Oh,
Why is
right.
he sitting here? And
Yeah.
then they can get really abstract concepts. And I'm like, I don't understand what's happening.
No, that's such a great point because I went when I moved, and I was a substitute teacher with the elementary kids.
Mm,
Right. And it's completely different because, I started in secondary. And so to sub in elementary and they start crying, right?
right?
And I'm just
Right.
looking at that like, okay, I don't even know what to do at this point,
Exactly.
except, I mean, you figure it out. But in that initial moment, it's like, you're crying? What? Why are you crying?
Absolutely, Dee. Absolutely. And so I really I had to go through that process of I had to talk myself up because I
Mhm.
was a brand new teacher all over again. Even though I'd been teaching for 2 years, I
Yes.
was a brand new teacher all over again. And I was like, wait a minute. Now, if I'm that bad, I really did rely on, they wouldn't have hired me.
Right. No, it's so true. And I like how you said earlier about finding your people because I definitely feel like you have to create that network of support
Yeah.
because there are very dark times when you start questioning, what you're doing. Is this working? Why isn't this working? And you need objective people in your life that can pull you back and tell you, look, you are doing exactly the right thing. Maybe we just need to tweak this or that. But I think that definitely helps with
Yeah,
keeping that positivity to help you
it does.
keep going
Because
because otherwise you feel like you're treading water all the time.
all the time, that is very true. And as that new teacher, find those people, find your people, and find those who are going to be champions and advocates. If your school
Mm,
has a new teacher meeting session or planning session, um, don't forget people like the librarian. Don't forget people like the IT people. Those have to
mm,
be your people too,
yes,
because
yes.
though the classroom is where you're going to spend a lot of your time, you need those supports who are going to back you in terms of, oh, wait, we just got this in, or hey, have you seen this new software? So,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely.
You just reminded me of something that I learned from my mom. So,
Hmm.
she retired after 40 years of teaching
Yay,
middle
mom.
school. Well, she started with elementary and then middle school. Right? Yeah, I think she started social studies English, but then there was a need for math teachers. So she was one of the teachers that volunteered to change and she took classes
Wow.
in math. So, and then she said if she could go back, she would have been a math teacher because she loved it.
Loved
But
it.
the thing that she said, because when you were talking about, don't forget the librarian and the IT people, um, is she said she would tell me, well, I would observe her
Hmm.
um, interacting with the custodians, right? And she's like, everybody deserves respect, and especially the custodians that come in and clean all the classrooms. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that. And because sometimes it's really easy to just be busy doing your thing and they come in and get your trash or
Gosh.
sweep or mop and stuff and you don't really have a conversation with them because you're busy doing your thing. But because of her example with that, I always made sure that um, my kids, if there was trash on the floor or whatever, I always made sure that my kids make sure you pick that, because you know how kids like to throw their trash from
Absolutely.
afar into the trash can. And I would say, hey, go pick that up if
Exactly.
they missed it. Um, and or even sometimes if it would get, dirty or whatever activity we were doing and just having them sweep up because I always brought my own broom in. Because I
Mm.
did have some kids who would say, oh, the custodian will clean it. And I'm thinking to myself,
Oh.
no, no.
Yeah.
Yes, they come and change the trash and mop, but they don't clean up after your mess. You
Right.
need to
You
clean
made
up
this
your
mess.
mess. Yeah, exactly. And I've always been really strict about that.
I can definitely say, hey, that was a really beautiful lesson that your mom taught and that you observed, because it is sometimes lost on students that
Mm-hmm.
it takes everybody in the school to run the school. We, students and staff, we get into the hierarchy. Okay, this person's more important than this person. No, really and truly, the custodian is more important sometimes because they can get stuff done. They
Yes.
can help with things, whereas an administrator may not be able to. So
Mhm.
I even had to remind in the college prep program this summer, I had to remind our students, you always want to leave a space better, if possible, than when you arrived, because that sets the tone for you and how people see you.
Mhm.
And as high schoolers, they were going to question me, well, why?
Mhm.
And so I had a great generational talk. Gen Xers taught, push in your chair, do these things.
Yes.
But somebody's going to come sit in it right after me. Yeah, but somebody enters into a thought about you based on where your chair is left.
Yes. I
So
like that.
it's definitely new things that even new teachers are, you're trying to stay above water, but just reminding the kids, be your best at all times.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. You're such an inspiration.
Thank you.
So, if you could give yourself advice, Jamie, as a new teacher, you're coming in and knowing what you know. If you could have known that back then,
Mhm.
what key advice would you give yourself?
Children, adults, we're resilient
Mm.
and we're learning even if we put on the auspices that we're not.
Mhm.
So when I had students who were openly defiant,
Oh.
openly defiant,
Mhm.
but they were in control of their defiance. This was their choice
Right.
to recognize my own biases in that moment, to
Mhm.
say, oh, they're not getting it. They don't want to get it. But no, wait a minute. I need to get to where they are.
Mhm.
I need to get to where they are. Give students, the other thing I would remind myself, give students the space to feel comfortable, to bring troubles and concerns, and of course, deal with those in appropriate ways. But don't let the student dwell on it and use it as an excuse. So, on the flip side, as a new teacher, I initially struggled with those students who were openly defiant and those students who
Yes.
always had excuses,
Mm.
and trying to find the happy medium between those. And that happy medium looks different for every student at any given moment. But those were the two places where I felt most ill-equipped initially.
Yeah. How did you handle that? Like, can you recall the first time
Oh
you had
yeah,
a student you had
yeah,
a student that was defiant?
I do. I do. He
And how did that go?
So his defiance was, and he was witty. He was smart. He had quips for everything.
Mm.
Everything. I was like, do you sit up at night and think of just how you're going to make my day just go bad?
Yeah.
And what I started to do was I began to target him because I knew it was coming. He
Oh,
was going to have a snide
you
remark.
could
I knew
feel.
it was
Mm-hmm.
coming.
Yeah.
So I'm introducing a concept, such and such. What do you think about this? And it caught him off guard at first. What do you mean? I think about it? You're the teacher. Okay, well, no. I mean, you've got to produce this on a test. I've got mine. You've got yours to get. So, but eventually, that helped curb the behavior for that particular student.
Okay.
For my student who was always having an excuse, I couldn't. I didn't. I it for whatever reason. I just pulled the student aside one day and I asked the student, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Because You wouldn't have made it to this grade. I almost put it like back in their lap. You couldn't have made it to fifth grade if you really couldn't.
Yeah.
And they stopped. And the student admitted, I'm scared of failing.
Oh, yeah.
And which was interesting because that was the last thing I thought the student was going to say. I don't like school. I was waiting for something.
Right. Or I don't like you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm scared of failing.
Yeah.
Wow. You can conceptualize that in fifth grade,
Yeah.
because
That's
what
interesting.
but the fear of failing was keeping them at a city.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, so I had those, those kumbaya moments like, oh, what if you do? What if you're successful? But for me as a new teacher, that really took me aback as someone who loves learning, scared of failure. My fear of failure looked so different. I was that hyper vigilant. I wanted to get the best grades possible, not I want to maintain a C.
Right.
Because I don't want to fail.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, so that, and those
That's
two,
interesting.
those were the ones that stood out to me the most in my first year of teaching. And then by the time you get to the middle school setting from the high school setting, it was those more openly defiant, I don't like school, I don't like you. All right, well, let's, sometimes we got to call the parent in. Sometimes there's that. Sometimes there is all right, well, maybe I need to use you in other ways. Almost like in the elementary school, the line lead or something. How can I involve you in the class?
Give them leadership opportunities. Because you bring up a really good point that when you were saying like how fast, they have these quips and able to respond and they know how to push your buttons. And I thought the exact same thing about how my first year in teaching was to pilot an at-risk program for students who this was their last year. And if they didn't do well, they were going to have to go to an alternative learning center. So like this was it. And so I learned really quickly that this group of kids they're actually really smart, street savvy, even. They are observant. They know how to read people. I mean, I was actually really blown away with how smart they are. It's just in terms of academics, they struggled. And so, yeah, they're leaders and there are people that follow them.
Absolutely.
There are people that are scared of them too.
And that can happen to new teachers. I mean, you get into a classroom and some of these students, you might be new to the school, so the students have been together for a couple of years. And so they form a clique or they form whatever, but you're being authentic, being genuine, and sometimes going toe to toe with the smarts. All right, well, if you're going to come for me, I'm going to come for you. Let's go. Let's go.
Because even with, as you were talking about that, it reminded me of that group of students that I had where I would hear them talking about, what they did to another teacher. Yeah, we made that teacher cry. And I would say, who's that? What did you do? Well, she thinks she's so whatever. And so we did this or that to her. And then when I found out who it was, and I said, that's my friend. Please don't do that to my friend. I better not hear that you're doing that to her again. Oh, sorry. You know what I mean? And I would think to myself, wow, they really pride themselves on raising havoc on people.
It is. And it is adolescent behavior. It is adolescent behavior. But I even see now with the high school students with whom I work, again, their worldview is drastically different. Their worldview is very much, well, why does it matter if I push in my chair or not? Because somebody's going to sit in it within 3 seconds of me departing. And I did have to check myself. Yeah, why does it matter? Well, it matters because these things are translating into the world of work. And so I want to ensure that I, as a teacher, I, as a facilitator in your program, are making it so that you can present well at any moment, at any time, because just like you are observing our behaviors, we're observing your behaviors.
Mhm.
So you may be sitting across at a Burger King from a CEO. You go in, you apply for a job, and that CEO is like, oh, yeah, I saw you last week. You left your
Mhm.
tray and your garbage and all on the table.
Mhm.
So I think you're right,
Exactly.
Dylan, in terms of sometimes they do prey on new teachers in particular, because a new teacher is trying so much to be liked, respected, to be efficient, effective, and is trying to figure all of it out. Whereas those students have been in the building for years,
Mhm.
and they're
For
like,
years, like
yeah,
back to elementary school, in the neighborhood. They've known each other for a long time.
exactly.
I agree.
Yep,
Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Any last words?
New teachers, you're going to do amazing. You just have to believe that.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. That's right. And so, for those of you watching, I hope that this was helpful for you. Don't forget to like, click the subscribe button, and the notification bell so that you don't miss an upcoming video. I'm going to be talking with more of my friends in education, and Jamie's going to come back. And as always, you've got this.